In episode 3, Ethel and John continue their conversation about the ruby, and he finds it really interesting that she's bringing this up now, because she never used to talk about it. So he asks what changed, and she tells him that the Sandman is back, and he's going to be looking for it. And John's the only person who knows where it is, but he doesn't believe any of it's real. He's heard this lie before from his mother, and his mother is a perpetual liar, so he doesn't really buy into the fact that now all of a sudden he's going to be coming back looking for his things. This starts a bit of fighting between the two, where he reveals to his mother that he knows who his father is. And the story that his mother always told him was that his father died before he was born. With nothing but time on his hands, he decided to do a little research into the fact, and he found that Roderick Burgess had a mistress. Her name was Ethel Cripps. Thus, his father must be Roderick Burgess. This opens her up to telling him the true story of what happened between them and Roderick Burgess. When Roderick's men were coming after her, she hid the ruby and traded the helm for the amulet of protection, which right away John recognizes. That's what's been able to keep her girlish figure all these years. But in order to protect her son, she needs the ruby back. And he tells her that he rewired it. It only works for him now. He tells her, if you don't believe me, you can try using it yourself, but it won't work. And she explains, I don't want to use it. I want to give it back to him. But he doesn't want to jump to giving away a jewel that makes dreams come true. The more they talk, though, the more that he realizes that all of his mother's actions were done so to keep them alive. And he's willing to tell her where the ruby is as long as she brings it back to him. But she doesn't want to do that because the last time he had the ruby, a lot of people died. The way John looks at it, though, he was acting in self-defense because those people were trying to take the ruby from him. This is what probably ended him up in a maximum security mental institution. John continues to pitch his mother on the fact that he needs the ruby to protect her, but she explains that she doesn't need the ruby. She has the amulet of protection. She gets so frustrated after a while, she just takes the amulet off and says, all right, fine, you know what, here, have it. I'm going to give this to you, and you don't need the ruby. You can give it back to him, and he won't come after you. As soon as she hands it over, though, she immediately starts aging. I mean, she is technically like 140 years old, so it catches up to her pretty quickly. Her and John have to say their goodbyes, and within a couple minutes, she's dead. One of the guards in the institution comes in and sees what happened and immediately thinks that John must have done something to her. But when he pulls a gun on John, John uses that amulet of protection. The guard completely disintegrates. As John makes his way through the hospital, more guards disintegrate. He just casually walks out of the building, and there's Corinthian waiting for him. And he immediately starts befriending him. As for Morpheus, he's busy tracking down Joanna Constantine. He finds her in the middle of the night walking into a church. He tells her that they have business to talk about, but she blows him off because she doesn't recognize him. She heads on into the chapel, and she's been called there because she needs to perform an exorcist. But when Joanna finds out the target of the exorcism, she has no interest because it's the princess from the royal family. She showed up about an hour ago begging this priestess to marry her to a football player, but the priestess is convinced that she's actually been overtaken by a demon. It takes a little bit of convincing, but eventually Joanna agrees to perform the exorcism for a very high fee. She then puts on the priestly garments and she pretends to be the priest that's going to marry the princess to the footballer. But as she's going through the ritual and saying the spell to disperse the demon, she finds out that it isn't the princess who's possessed, it's actually the athlete. And this is a tough day for the princess because she was in love. And now the guy she's in love with is dead because he was overtaken by a demon. The demon is big, intimidating, yet Joanna isn't scared of him. She asks him, what's your name? And the demon doesn't want to tell her. And that's when Morpheus tells her his name is Agalaeth. Because Morpheus and Agalaeth know each other from way back. And when Agalaeth refers to Dream as Morpheus, that shocks Joanna. She always thought the Sandman was nothing more than a myth, and yet here he is in front of her. In fact, he was outside talking to her, and she blew him off. Agalaeth starts mentioning how he didn't really recognize Morpheus without his helm. And Agalaeth knows that it's in hell because it was traded to a demon, but the thing is, Agalaeth knows which demon it is. But before he can tell Morpheus, Joanna completes the exorcism, sending the demon back to hell. This really infuriates Morpheus, because that could have made the job a whole lot easier. But after he calms down a bit, he walks outside and tells Joanna that he showed up because he's looking for the pouch full of sand. She tells him that she bought it from an estate sale a while back. She couldn't even get the drawstrings open, and she doesn't know where it is. It could be anywhere. When he tells her that they need to find it, she doesn't really get the severity of the situation. So he tells her that if he doesn't find it, then his realm will cease to exist, dreams will cease to exist. It's a slippery slope, and it doesn't end well for mankind. She tells him that she'll help him, but she'll help him the next day, and she works alone. She doesn't need him or his raven following her around, and he didn't bring a raven. But when he looks to his left, there's one staring at him. He walks up to it and asks, "All right, what is your name?" And it turns out the raven speaks fluent English, and his name is Matthew. He was sent by Lucien, and he was told that Morpheus wanted nothing to do with him, which is true. But he also knows that Morpheus needs him, like for this very moment as Joanna gets away. It's really late at night. They know that she's going home to bed, so finding her isn't really going to be an issue for the Sandman. But Matthew wants to help. That's what his purpose is now. Turns out he used to be a human, and not a real great one. He died and he was reborn into this raven. Lucien sent him to help Morpheus out, so that's what he's planning on doing, even though he doesn't really know who Morpheus is. But he's looking at this role as a raven as a second chance. So Morpheus agrees to let Matthew tag along. It doesn't take long for him to locate Joanna, and she's having a dream, but it's more like a nightmare. And Morpheus realizes that this dream is also a memory. It's a memory of Joanna trying to dispel a demon who her satanic boyfriend just summoned as he was, quote, fooling around with magic. As she was getting rid of the demon, it resulted in a little girl named Astra dying. Joanna always blamed herself. When Joanna wakes up from this nightmare, there's Morpheus standing there. This event is the reason why Joanna hasn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. Every time she does, this memory/dream/nightmare just keeps reoccurring. But now that Morpheus is in her living room, she might as well look for the sand. She does so in her office, which is cluttered with a bunch of junk. And she asks him what's so important about this sand, and he explains that it's a part of him, which begs the question how he lost it, and he tells her it was stolen from me by a magic user named Burgess. She then realizes that the person standing in front of her was the legend of Roderick Burgess, because growing up, everybody was told that Burgess had the devil himself locked up in his basement. But now she realizes it wasn't the devil, it was the Sandman. He doesn't confirm it, but he all but confirms it. He then notices that there's a picture of Joanna and another woman. And what stands out about this picture is the fact that Joanna actually looks happy in it. She then realizes where the sand is. It's at this woman's apartment. She was seeing this woman for a decent bit, and she decided to stay with her. But to the woman, it looked like she was moving in. Things were moving too fast for Joanna, and one day she took a job, and 6 months later, she still hasn't returned. She doesn't even know if the woman still lives in the same building. I mean, she really ghosted her. Because of that, they head over, but Joanna is insistent that she's heading in alone. And Morpheus is insistent that he's not waiting a long time. He'll give her a couple minutes, but after that, he's heading in himself. Joanna enters the apartment, and her ex-girlfriend is thrilled to see her. Doesn't take long for them to rekindle the relationship, and next thing you know, they're making out. But that make-out session ends abruptly. It's as if the ex-girlfriend suddenly remembered she got ghosted after years, and she starts calling Joanna selfish, and it takes Joanna really off guard. But then her girlfriend starts disappearing into sand, and Joanna realizes that this was all a dream. She wakes up, and she's in the same apartment, but her girlfriend is nowhere to be found. And that's because her girlfriend is bedridden, clutching the bag of sand. Morpheus explains that that sand was never meant for human consumption. And what happens when you abuse it is you slowly deteriorate over time. Joanna's ex-girlfriend is dying. I mean, she's on death's door. The only thing keeping her alive is the sand. Joanna begs Dream to do something about it, but there's nothing he really can do other than give her a nice dream. So that's what he does, putting her in a very nice dreamlike state. She then dies in her sleep. Joanna and Morpheus then say their goodbyes, and Joanna tells Matthew, keep an eye on him. Right before she does walk away, Morpheus tells her, by the way, that dream/nightmare you deal with, you're not going to have to deal with it anymore. When she's out of earshot, Matthew asks Dream, all right, where to next? And he tells him, we're going to go to hell. At first, Dream wanted to send Matthew back to the dream realm, but he realized he might actually have use for him, so he's bringing him along. And Matthew was excited until he found out where they were going. But he doesn't really have any choice in the matter, and Dream and Matthew are off to the underworld. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it, smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked, If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.